Hey everyone. This time we are going to continue the lessons on quantitative research. And we covered the lesson 3, strengths of a quantitative research, approaches in conducting a research, and similarities and differences of a qualitative research and a quantitative research. We have objectives for this lesson. At the end of this lesson, the students are expected to describe the strengths and weaknesses of quantitative research, explain the approaches in conducting a research, and also the last one is compare and contrast quantitative research and qualitative research. So let's proceed to the strengths of a quantitative research. What makes a quantitative research more credible, appealing, and scientific compared to a qualitative research is talking about the strengths of a quantitative research. We have here the strengths of a quantitative research. The first one, quantitative research can test and validate the already constructed theories about how and why phenomena occur. Before a quantitative research is conducted, a researcher has already the target answer to his research question. What he needs to do is to validate only his tentative answer to his problem. Quantitative research is conducted to refresh or recycle the obsolete idea to make it applicable to the current situation of the community. Unlike with a qualitative research, a researcher starts with scratch. It cannot test and validate the existing theories because its main goal is to generate new theory which is later on a potential topic for a quantitative research. If a qualitative research is able to generate a new theory and sooner, the principle is made available online or in a printed material. A quantitative researcher can validate its truthfulness to refine what needs to be improved in that theory. To validate a theory means to check whether it is true, partially true, or it needs improvement. Now, next one is a quantitative research tests hypotheses that are constructed before the data are collected. Highly credible quantitative researches have hypotheses. However, not all quantitative researches have hypotheses. Descriptive research has no hypothesis, but still applies statistical tools which are purely descriptive, such as standard deviation, frequency, percentage, and mean. Inferential quantitative researches require hypotheses which can be tested using the t-tests, z-test, analysis of variance, or that's the ANOVA, chi-square, Spearman's rule person R, and the regression. All qualitative researches don't require hypotheses. Thus, they don't test hypotheses. Testing hypotheses is one that can be done only by a quantitative research but never be done by a qualitative research. The next strength of a quantitative research is that quantitative research can generalize research findings and it can be replicated on many different populations and subpopulations. One research problem can generate different solutions from one setting to another. Quantitative research can make a generalization out of these different ideas coming from various research locales. For instance, A researcher conducted a research on implementation of the special education curriculum in Surigao. Another researcher is interested in finding out of that research. He wants to replicate it using a wider scope, for example, a regional level. The latest researcher can make a generalization using his current research findings and the results of previous researchers. If there is a research finding available online and that interests a researcher, he can replicate the research using different setting with proper citation and of course using many references. The other strand is quantitative research is useful for obtaining data that allow quantitative predictions about significant events. For example, the Pag-asa and the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or the PHIVOLCS, are some of the government agencies that conduct quantitative researches that predict the occurrence of natural calamities since Philippines is always hit by typhoons due to its geographical location which produce heavy rains and flooding of large areas and also strong winds which result in heavy casualties to human life and destruction to crops and properties. So the agency like Pag-asa and the FIVOX can use data following the quantitative research. Also, we can have here the Department of Agriculture and the BFAR, the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, are also doing quantitative research to predict what appropriate modern techniques to employ to increase the production of the agricultural and the aquatic resources for human consumption. Next here, we have the quantitative research provides precise quantitative numerical data. Research data which are represented in quantitative forms such as the tables, graphs, and figures are more precise compared with data presented through words, sentences, or paragraphs, in which it done on a qualitative. Data in guidance office are represented in figures, for example. Though there is no explanation of the data, it is understandable. However, many research data are presented through tables, graphs, or figures are not comprehensible without verbal explanation. But this verbal explanation is just precise but complete. Another thing here is that quantitative research may have higher credibility with many people in power, like the administrations, the politicians, people who fund the research programs. A quantitative research can lay down the expected results of his research proposals that can attract the funding agencies to give funds to the research proposals. Unlike with a qualitative research, a researcher cannot lay down the target result of his study since he starts with scratch. He doesn't know yet the possible outcome of his study since the research process undergoes changes as it progresses. Quantitative researchers have direct benefits to workplace or funding agency. Qualitative researchers have benefits to the community as a whole, since the main target of qualitative research is the cultural appreciation, reflection, and preservation. Quantitative research are very beneficial to the decision-making process of the workplace of the funding agency. Another one strength is the quantitative research involves data analysis, which is relatively less time consuming since it is can statistically software such as the Microsoft Excel and social package for social sciences or the SPSS. Analysis and interpretation of the quantitative data is relatively quick and precise. No flowering words are manifested in the quantitative data and analysis and interpretation. Unlike with the qualitative research, data analysis and interpretation are lengthy. Qualitative data are not best presented unless they become saturated. Saturated of data requires longer period of time and wider research settings. Another thing here is a quantitative research involves data collection using quantitative methods which are relatively quick. Research instruments such as a checklist, survey questionnaire, and multiple choice paper pencil test are the main reasons why collection of the quantitative data is relatively quick. Collection of quantitative data only requires 1 to 2 settings. First, setting involves the orientation of the objectives of the study as well as the distribution of the research instrument to the respondents or the distribution of your research questionnaire to your respondents. After 1 hour of answering, research instrument can be retrieved. There are some instances that the retrieval of the research instrument happens after 1 to 2 weeks. Unlike with a qualitative research, data collection is relatively long since multiple research methods such as the interview, to focus group discussion, participant observation, participatory rapid appraisal, document analysis, and scanning archive materials are all employed to give detailed meanings and metaphors to the phenomenon. And research phenomenon is anything that happens in the classical and contemporary society that has a great impact on the life of the people. Next here is the weaknesses of the quantitative research. So we're done with these trends. Now let's deal on the weaknesses of the quantitative research. First, what makes a quantitative research behind compared with a qualitative research is talking about the weaknesses of the quantitative research. The first weakness of a quantitative research is that it involves difficulty in data analysis. It is also known as statistical research. Statistical treatment of data can only be done by a statistician. If a quantitative researcher has no exposure in statistical competition, then he will definitely get difficulty in data analysis. Though we have software that gives only a summary of the statistical findings, but it doesn't analyze and interpret them. So still, we need a statistician, an expert statistician for us to analyze and interpret the data that we have gathered. Analysis and interpretation of data lie on the hands of the researcher. Testing hypothesis is very difficult, particularly in accepting or rejecting denial hypothesis. Unlike with the qualitative research, it doesn't apply statistical treatment. Data is purely done in words, phrases, sentences, and compositions. As long as the researcher is able to explain the phenomenon in words, he can do the analysis of a qualitative data. So there is a minimal use of numbers in qualitative research. Next here is that Quantitative research requires extra resources to analyze the findings. Yes, it's true because since analysis of statistical findings is difficult, a researcher needs to hire a statistician who requires a professional fee. So we have to pay the statistician for this. He also needs to hire tabulator, critic reader, and other research consultant who needs snacks, meals, and professional fees. Unlike with the qualitative research, data gathering activities are all personally engaged. This means that it is the researcher who deeply immerses with his participants. He doesn't need to hire tabulator and statistician since no quantitative data are taken from the guide questions. Qualitative researcher is the key instrument in data gathering activities. He doesn't need extra resources to analyze the findings and results. Of course, if the researcher is an expert statistician, so the conduct of the quantitative research will be easy for him. Because he can analyze and interpret the data, he only has to hire a grammarian for the research paper. Another thing is quantitative research is expensive and it requires a lot of time to perform the statistical treatment and analysis. Yes, it is true. Credible statisticians and research consultants have a high professional fee. Aside from the expenses needed for the reproduction of the research instrument, a researcher needs to collect many review of related literature to support the findings of the research. The collection of the review of related literature or the RRL requires a strong internet connection which requires a subscription fee. So aside from getting a statistician, a consultant for the paper when it comes to grammar, and also we have to subscribe some internet sources wherein we can get the review of related literature, and there is a payment for that. Sometimes quantitative researcher needs to go to the physical libraries of the different schools to collect related RRL to make his research more valid and reliable. If there are no available statisticians to interpret the statistical finding, a researcher needs to consult many experts just to give justice to his quantitative data. All of these scientific research processes require material and human resources. So you are going to produce a survey questionnaire for that. So you are going to photocopy for that. And also you need manpower or human resources for us to conduct the study. Unlike with the qualitative research, it oftentimes doesn't require the review of related literature. Data can be recorded using a tape or video recorder with the permissions of the participant. It doesn't mean that the qualitative doesn't not need review of related literature, but what it means is that the RRL for that is always coming from a direct observation and also coming from the direct participant. So there's no need for you to pay for the subscription of any related sites wherein you can get the review of related literature. A researcher should ask the approval of the participants before he can record the interview and focus group discussion. Qualitative research process is less expensive compared with the quantitative research. Another thing here is that quantitative research has limited outcomes since it involves a structured questionnaire with closed-ended questions. A quantitative researcher cannot explore the analysis and interpretation of the data Beyond his statistical finding, which is just only taken from limited options of the closed-ended question. He cannot also use other research parameters not specified in the methodology. In other words, research parameters and statistical results are scripted already in the table, graph, or figure. A researcher needs not to mention something which is not indicated in the data presentation. Unlike with qualitative research, a researcher has all the chances to generate different ideas from many participants. All different ideas coming from participants should be explained in details. All verbatim quotes to the participants should be analyzed and interpreted. Wider scope of data analysis and interpretation is evident in a qualitative research. So the quantitative research, it involves the closed-ended questions, while the quantitative, that involves the open-ended questions, wherein the participants can elaborate more their answers, whereas on the quantitative it is limited. Okay, another weaknesses is that quantitative research involves a lot of resources for data collection. Large number of respondents is evident in quantitative research because if you have this small number of participants or respondents, your study is not valid and reliable. So we need a big population for that. Most scientifically done, a quantitative research has a minimum number of 300 respondents. Reproduction of the instrument which in you are going to reproduce your survey questionnaire requires many bond papers, and that costs a lot. It also needs printer and inks. Mobilization fund for the data gathering activities is really necessary. Minimum health standards in collection of data should really be followed since from the start we are following the protocol in the COVID. Unlike with the qualitative research, a researcher can only have a copy guide questions that can be used in all settings of the interviews and focus group discussions. Interview can be done via email, messenger, or phone calls, particularly face-to-face. Conduct of school-related activities are discouraged due to the pandemic. That was during the pandemic. But also, a quantitative research can be done through email or through Google Forms. We used that one during the pandemic. We used Google Forms wherein we sent the questionnaire to our respected respondents, and we are going to take a long time for us to wait for the results because sometimes the respondents do not have time for that to answer if it was sent in online. So we have to do it on a face-to-face wherein we have to go to their respected places to conduct the study. Another thing is quantitative research data are prone to manipulation. There are instances that quantitative research findings don't conform to the tentative solution of the problem already constructed before the research is conducted. There are cases that the researcher questions the gathered data since they don't agree to the actual result or situation. What a researcher does is to manipulate the data in order to conform to the expected result he wants to generate. Manipulation of data should not be tolerated in any reason or any form since it is violation of the ethical standards in research. There are factors why the current research findings don't conform to the gathered review of related literature. One of these is the concentration or the condition of mood of the respondents during the conduct of the gathering data. These respondents may not be guided accordingly as the process of answering the survey questionnaires. Some respondents just don't give their answer to the questionnaires without reading and interpreting the message of the statement. Another factor why current research finding doesn't agree with actual result is the lack of validity and reliability of the survey questionnaire. So that is why your survey questionnaire needs to be validated first by an expert, usually an English teacher or a grammarian, for us to validate your questionnaire. Right after the validation, you are going to conduct first the reliability test before conducting the actual um, conducting of research questionnaire to your respondents. Let's proceed now to the approaches applied in conducting the research. So we have our approaches. So we have the inductive approach and the other one is the deductive approach. When we say inductive approach, is also known as bottom-up approach. It is concerned with the generation of the new theory emerging from the specific data to general idea. It is often sometimes associated with qualitative research. It starts with the observations and theories are proposed towards the end of the research process as a result of personal reflection. However, inductive approach can also be applied in data analysis for quantitative research. In what way? Qualitative research is inductive since the researcher starts with observations and the new theory or insights is generated towards the end of the research process. The researcher starts from scratch, that's for a qualitative, a completely open mind without any preconceived data of what will be found. In qualitative research, the researcher begins from gathering all small or specific data to the subject before he will give generalization towards the end of the research process. This means that no conclusion will be formulated. New insights or theories gained will be used instead of conclusions. So again, the qualitative research are using the inductive approach. The deductive approach is also known as from top to down approach. It usually begins with a hypothesis. It emphasizes generally on causality. It starts with general idea to a specific investigation of a certain phenomena. It is usually associated with quantitative research. Nevertheless, deductive approach can also be employed in qualitative research. Why is quantitative research deductive? It's because it starts from an already constructed theory or principle. The researcher begins with a hypothesis or already constructed theory. He focuses on exploring the previously researched phenomenon from different perspectives. The aim of a quantitative research is to test the hypothesis of the theory. Quantitative research, the researcher begins with expected pattern that is tested against observations. In other words, the researcher explores a known theory or phenomenon and tests it that theory is valid in a given circumstance. The reasoning starts with theory and leads to new hypothesis. This hypothesis is put into the test confronting it with observations that either led to confirmation or rejection of the hypothesis. In other words, inductive approach is not mutually exclusive to qualitative research. Deductive approach is also not mutually exclusive to a quantitative research. And now let's proceed to the nature of a quantitative research. Quantitative research emphasizes the expressions such as numerical forms, objective measurements, statistical or mathematical method of collecting data through polls, closed-ended questions, or questionnaire and surveys. Numbers, scales, hypotheses, calculation, computations, and statistics are applied in a quantitative research. Quantitative research is objective as it only seeks precise measurement and analysis of target concept to answer inquiries. The researcher employs the standard criteria in analyzing the data. He doesn't go beyond what is found in set research parameters. He employs only the close-ended research instrument in gathering data. Conclusion is formulated towards the end of the research process. One word that reflects the true nature of a qualitative research is numerical or statistical. Quantitative research is also known as statistical research. Closed-ended questions are questions that can only be answered by selecting from a limited number of options, usually the multiple choice, yes or no, or the rating scale, from strongly agree or to strongly disagree. They are the foundation of all statistical techniques applied on questionnaires and surveys for a quantitative research. And qualitative research is different from this because open-ended questions will be utilized in a qualitative research. Let's differentiate the quantitative research and the qualitative research. What are the differences of the two? So we have the difference of the quantitative research and qualitative research. Quantitative research uses numbers and figures to denote a particular phenomenon. It requires the researcher to focus his full attention on the objectives of this study. By doing this, he tends to exclude his own thoughts and feelings about the subject or the topic. Quantitative research is described as objective research, while the qualitative is described as the subjective. Quantitative research is characterized in objectives in which only the real are factual, not the emotional or existence of the object matters. Qualitative research uses verbatim quotes of the participants and it employs thematic analysis or clustering of ideas. Researchers' prior knowledge and experience can be used by him in discussing the data. He can also use personal views on the topic. He can be part of the participants of the study. He is the key instrument in gathering the data. That's for a qualitative. In quantitative research is more specific compared with a qualitative research. Qualitative research is broader compared with quantitative research. Quantitative can only validate the already established theory, while in qualitative, a wider scope compared with a quantitative research. The former can generate new theory. Every time that there is a new complicated qualitative research, there is an additional of new theory to the existing theories. Qualitative research is primary exploratory research. It is used to gain understanding of the underlying reasons, opinions, and motivations. It provides insights into the problem or helps to develop ideas or hypotheses to a potential quantitative research. Quantitative research is used for to quantify the problem using the rating scale and other research parameters. It is used to quantify the reasons, opinions, and the motivations. So in summary, the quantitative involves numbers, tables, and figures, while the qualitative, it involves the words and the composition of your thoughts or opinions. So we have covered the general reminder. So this is always the reminder every time we have our lessons for us to follow this general reminder to answer our task number 3. So you are going to answer the task number 3 in paragraph form. So we have 5 questions. So you have to answer the following questions in a paragraph forms. You write your answer in your notebook. So I guess that would be all for today. And thank you everyone for listening. Have a good day.